Time is the most valuable resource you will ever have, and yet it's the one that we often spend like it's worthless, like it's infinite, it'll always be there, we'll never run out of time, and it's simply not true. When I was a teenager, I often felt, as I'm sure many of you did, that time was just going to stretch on forever. The summers were endless, often boring. A single school year would feel just like, when is it going to end? Counting down the days till graduation. And even small breaks, like winter vacation, they seem to feel so much more meaningful. Like summer break and Christmas break and Thanksgiving break, it just felt so long and impactful, and that it was just going to always be there. I remember sitting in my room playing games for hours. I used to play League of Legends and CSGO and Minecraft as well, just forever. And I always felt like I was just always going to be able to do that. I was just kind of walking around through life with no real destination, and in a way that was beautiful because I wasn't worried about the future, but I really was never thinking about whether or not I was wasting the day, because back then it didn't feel like you could waste the day. Nowadays, as an adult, you'll blink and another month goes by, or like, wow, it's already Friday, or man, it's already been years since I've graduated from college. Like, wow, fall is already here, or summer is already over. Birthdays are going to sneak up on you. People that you used to talk to every day will just be like, wow, I haven't spoken to them in years. And it's not like the clock is moving faster or anything. It's that adulthood has made time a lot more fleeting. You perceive it to be shorter now because of all the bills and work and responsibilities, all of the invisible upkeep that nobody really warned you about. You felt like you used to have hours wide open to you, and now everything is divvied up into obligations before you even have a chance to experience things. And the scariest part is realizing that you're never going to get back to that feeling of abundance. We all hope that we will, that we'll gain that freedom and that time back to do what we want. But for most of us, that illusion of infinite time belongs to childhood. Adulthood is when you start to think about every day being a withdrawal from an account. You're never going to be able to have all that time again because you're always trying to take bits and pieces to go to work, or I've got to go to the gym, I've got to do these things now. You don't have this infinite piggy bank of time anymore. You're always spending your limited time doing things that you don't want to do, and the cruel part is that you don't know how much time is left. You might have 80 years ahead of you, or you might have 20 years or 10 years. Nobody knows how long we've got. I think a big part of why time felt so abundant and infinite back in childhood is because you weren't thinking about the future. Nobody in middle school was lying around waiting, man, when am I going to start investing in my Roth IRA? When am I going to, worry about this job, and then the next job will come after that, and then when I'm 40, I'll become a project manager. No one is thinking about that kind of thing. You don't think about your career trajectory at a young age. Even high school and college by extension, we're not really worrying about the future. You didn't really think about whether or not your parents would get sick one day and they're going to get old. You weren't calculating how much your body is going to age and how you're going to feel fragile when you're 35. Like, oh my God, my back doesn't feel like it did when I was 20 years old, right? You don't think about how fragile life actually is. The biggest countdowns were always summer break, or your birthday, or the release of a new video game, like GTA 6 is coming out, right? I bet if you're still a teenager, it still feels like that is one of the most important things and the coolest thing happening in your life. All these new releases and events, and it's just fun to be young. But as you become an adult, those things don't mean as much anymore. I don't really care about summer break now. I don't notice it because I'm not in school anymore. It doesn't have any meaning to me. And I think the reason that the hours felt so long as a kid is because you weren't counting them. You weren't really worried about when XYZ was going to happen because it was always going to be there. But adulthood forces you to count those hours. Life gets chopped up into bills and deadlines and milestones. Rent is going to be due in a couple weeks, and taxes are every April, and you got to fix your car by Friday, right? Suddenly you're never just in the day that you're living. You're always worried about what's coming next, what day you need to be preparing for, the next rainy day that's going to happen. The more that you measure, the smaller that every hour is going to feel. The more that you prepare for the future, the less you can actually live in the moment. The present is just going to feel like a staging ground for what comes next. And I think that's part of why nostalgia hits so hard, because it's not just missing the good old days when you were a kid and like, oh, everything was simpler. It's you were missing that life didn't have a clock hanging over your head back then. You're probably longing for the ability to be able to let a whole Saturday or weekend go by and not feel guilty about it, that you're wasting time. Back then, you believed that there would always be another Friday night to game with the boys. There was always going to be another weekend. There was always going to be free time. But here's the truth, man. A year is a year, no matter how old you are. If you're 20 years old or 80 years old, a year is the same to everyone. We all have 24 hours in a day. The difference is just how it feels. Because when you're 15 or when you're a teenager or whatever, a year is 1/15th of your whole life, right? That's a pretty big deal. It's pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of milestones when you're a teenager, like you get your driver's license and then you go take the SAT and you go to college. There's a lot of big milestones. But when you're 50, that same year is just 1/50th of your entire life. It feels smaller. You don't have as many milestones to compare that year to. It's like, oh, just another year. The clock hasn't changed. You have changed. But the perceived time is a smaller fraction of your entire life, and so it feels faster. And that's why people say that time seems to speed up as you age. It doesn't literally speed up. It's not that the days are actually moving quicker, but it's because they take up a less and smaller portion of your personal timeline. A single year as a teenager is huge, but when you're retired, that's nothing. And unless you actively resist it, you're going to be watching decades blur together. You need to actually be sitting in the moment and realize, man, it's been 6 months already. How is it already almost September of 2025? That's crazy. The only way to slow down is just to pay more attention, to live in ways that make moments actually stick out in your mind, to have distinct memories. I know when everything went online back in 2020, I was still in college on Zoom classes, and I still distinctly remember, what the hell was 2021 and 2022? These were just lost years where I was just finishing up school. I'm like, what was that period of my life? Because I'd have very few distinct memories of it. I wasn't living in the moment really thinking, hey, I should go out and do things and form memories. Otherwise, you just let literal years go by, and I genuinely can't really point to many distinct moments during that period of my life. They just blur together. You have to do things that create sharper edges in memory, not just these blurry lines that smooth together. You don't want to live your life in a way where you look back and think, what the hell was all that? Because I don't remember any of it. Another thing that adulthood forces you to do is to confront just how fragile time really is. Because when you're a kid, you don't think about illness or problems or bills or anything like that, right? Your parents are old, they'll handle that. They have those problems to deal with. I'm just a teenager. I don't have to think about that. But we all talk as though everyone is guaranteed 80 or 90 years, right? That's just an average, or not even the average. I think the average is 78, 79 years in America. That could happen to you, but life can also change at any point, right? Accidents can happen, illness, like I said, tragedies that no one could see coming. You don't know what's going to happen. You could do your absolute best and still wake up being 32 years old, being diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. You don't know what's going to happen. I've seen it personally happen. One of my best childhood friends lost his mother when she was 41, 42 because she got cancer. Anything can happen. You live a pretty normal life, you try to eat healthy enough, you exercise enough, but you don't know what's going to be in your stack of cards. And if you don't think about that, that can really surprise you and come up out of nowhere and really shock your worldview. It makes you realize just how much of your future you've actually been taking for granted. Because we're going to make decisions that suggest that tomorrow is always going to be guaranteed, but it isn't. You don't know if you have 40 years left or 40 days or 40 minutes. And if you knew that you only had 40 days, you wouldn't waste them, right? So why waste 40 years? The lie is thinking that you're always going to have more, that later is just going to be some safe place that you can store your life and that you'll worry about it later and you can use those years later. But later is just a word we use to comfort ourselves. It's not real. It's not an actual thing. Later often is never. And it's not about living in fear. You just have to internalize and realize that you have to actually live in a more conscious manner. You stop treating hours as cheap and replaceable because you're never going to get hours back. As I titled this video, time is the most valuable resource that you are wasting. You need to stop assuming that you can just waste today and I'll do it tomorrow, I'll worry about it later. That is not an option. I compare time to money a lot because the metaphor fits well, right? If you had $10,000 in your bank account, would you really spend 5,000 of it on something that you didn't even want, like a TV or something? Probably not. That would be pretty dumb. But with time, we don't think that logically. We can throw years away because we think, oh, well, I've got decades ahead of me. I can just screw around in my 20s and waste the whole decade. People often give way too much time to jobs that they hate. They stay there for years, longer than they should, or decades. Or maybe people stay in relationships that they know are toxic, right? And you are wasting your time. Or we play video games or distract ourselves for hours a day because we know that that is our coping mechanism. And because the balance isn't visible, we don't see the effects of wasting time soon enough, we're not going to feel the cost of that. But the difference between money and time is that you can always earn more money, but you can never earn more time. You will never get those hours back unless somehow magically in 50, 60 years when you're an old man and suddenly there's some way to transfer your consciousness into a robot and you can live forever. Unless that happens, your time is finite. Every hour that you spend is gone forever. You're never going to go backwards. And so you can choose to invest that time wisely, or you can just throw it away. But either way, it doesn't come back. And of course, we often don't utilize and invest that time properly. We waste it. We think we're spending it on safety or success and that we are making the correct decisions, but sometimes all we're doing is just throwing it away. And that's why I think regret stings so much when it comes to wasted time, because it's not just as though you had wished that you chose your time better and that you chose a better career. It's realizing that you can never get that time back. If you go to college and you study a certain field and then you get a job in that field and you spend 10 years in that field and then you wake up and you're 35 or whatever, and you're like, man, I think I probably chose the wrong path. This isn't for me. I need to start over. Well, guess what, dude? You're 35. You're not 21, 22 anymore. You can't just start over as easily. You just wasted 12, 13 years of your life. And let me be clear. It's not just a complete waste because you did learn things about yourself, hopefully. But I'm saying that it's not any easier. It's more difficult now that you've spent those valuable 12, 13 years or whatever it is. You know, you've spent those decades on something that you realize wasn't working out. It's the same thing with relationships or with a job, or you decided that you don't actually like where you live and that you really should have been living elsewhere, you know, in a different city closer to your family, whatever it is. The older that you get, the harder it is to confront the fact that you might have chosen incorrectly or you've chosen a path that wasn't best for you. And again, between money and time, you can always refund a bad purchase, or you can always get back on your feet and recover a financial loss. I've lost money before, I've made dumb decisions, but you can always make the money back. But a wasted year is permanent. I guess in some sense, there is always going to be another year, but it's finite. Like, yes, maybe you are 35 and you've chosen a career that wasn't right for you and you can switch now. But just know that that decade that you just spent cannot be refunded. You can't just replenish that and rewind the clock to 21 and try again. You now have to start from 35. And so that means that you only have about maybe 40 or 50 years left if you're lucky. You don't have 60 years like you did. I think you know what I'm saying here. There's a difference. You can get back on your feet and you can switch your career, but just know that you're going to be starting from a more difficult position now. The tricky thing is that wasting time doesn't always look like laziness, right? It's not always about lying in bed and staring at your phone and you're just wasting your time. Sometimes wasting time looks like working yourself to the bitter end in a job that doesn't matter to you. And you're convincing yourself that you are building stability, you are building a career in the path that you should be on. Sometimes it looks like chasing success so hard that you forget to live at all. I feel that a lot, where I'm like, man, I do enjoy YouTube and I do enjoy making videos, but should this only be the only thing that I'm working on? Should I really be dedicating virtually my entire day to this one thing where it's really just about the numbers? Or maybe for you, like I said, it looks like staying in a certain relationship, or you've got a certain habit that you know is draining you. Like you know that you shouldn't be grinding mid lane or grinding jungle in League for 4 hours a day after work, right? Because you know that the idea of changing and improving that habit and getting rid of it is scarier than the reality of wasting away. It's very difficult to change habits and to get out of a job or to get out of a relationship that you know is not good for you. But I can assure you that wasting your time is and wasting the reality that you're living in is going to be scarier. There's some phrase, and I'm probably going to mess it up, but the pain of regret is much worse than the pain of discipline and the pain of doing action towards improving your life. Do you really want to be wasting all your years and time in things that don't serve you? Or do you want to actually improve your life? One of those is more painful than the other, and you have to make the call as to which one is correct for you. But again, that's what makes it dangerous, because wasting time can often disguise itself as productivity, that you're busy, you're constantly moving, you're filling your hours. Like, hey, I've been in meetings all day at my 9 to 5. I'm productive. I'm spending my time well. But what if you're filling your day with hours that don't mean anything? And that one day you're going to look back and realize that you've been spending years going in circles or not actually accomplishing anything. That's why I decided to quit my job eventually and go full-time on YouTube, because I was just so sick and tired of spending literally years of my life in something that I knew was not accomplishing anything. I wasn't believing in what I was doing. I didn't feel like I had any sort of impact, and I knew that I needed more. I knew that I wasn't making progress for myself or for, my family, my future, and I needed to get out of this thing that was just draining my time. But again, I talked about this recently about productivity and how it's very cruel that we punish ourselves for resting, and that resting feels like wasted time, and that getting out of something that is toxic like a job or relationship, it might feel really scary. But at least if you do that, and if you finally get to a place where you can rest, you do get something back. You don't get the time back, but you get your energy and your peace back, at least some of it, hopefully. And if you continue to waste your time on the wrong things, you're not even going to get rest back. You're not going to get that peace at all. It's just going to leave you feeling emptier. When you were younger, you probably thought a lot about how slow the afternoons used to feel, the boredom, the boredom of summer break. I could often sit for hours doing nothing in particular and feel like that day was just going to last forever. And it's like, man, when is the clock going to hit 4 p.m. when I can leave school, right? Or not even just with school, like gaming. I would spend hours playing Minecraft, and I played League of Legends a lot, I'll admit that. And I would spend entire evenings and weekends or weeks with my friends building up a realm in Minecraft and building a castle in a village that, I haven't seen that thing in years, right? It wasn't really producing anything. I was just having fun. Or I used to go on bike rides more often, and I would just ride around my neighborhood just to go on a bike ride, not because I was trying to go anywhere, just because it was fun. And those hours often felt like they were just going to stretch on forever, because I was just living in the moment. I was not worried about the future at all. But again, nowadays, you'll blink and the whole day goes by, and it's like, wow, what's going on, man? Adulthood is a thing that requires so much planning and worrying about the future. I have to worry about getting a house now, and eventually I'll have children and build a family. And you can't afford to just let the whole afternoon go by. You have to be living for the future. And that's the tragedy of growing up. You're not just losing the time, you're losing your ability to hold on to time. You can't be present in the moment because you've got too many fucking things to worry about. But again, there's this lie that I think we tell ourselves that's very problematic. And that it's, I will worry about this later. You see this so much nowadays with buy now, pay later schemes where, don't buy this $100 pair of shoes, just pay in installments of 4, just pay $25, and if you miss the interest payment, who cares, right? People are living with this idea that they can just worry about it later. Their future self will worry about it. We are putting our problems off to the future and saying, I'll start eating healthier when it actually becomes a problem. You see this a lot too with healthcare, where healthcare is not as preventative as it should be. It's so much more about just fixing the problem when it arises. We don't work out as much as we should. We only start to improve our bodies once we feel like the ill effects have hit us. Or conversely, we think about, maybe once I get this promotion, then I'll finally be able to relax. Once I save enough money, then I can travel. Then I can do whatever. Or once I've hit 30, I know I do this with myself, once I become a dad, then I can finally slow down and I don't have to grind as much with YouTube. We're constantly putting things off, and we're pushing the starting line of our real lives further and further away. We keep pushing the goalpost down the field, and we're convincing ourselves that eventually we'll get around to it, or eventually I'll be happy once this can happen. But what if that never does actually happen? It's like if you're hoarding your vacation days for work, but you never actually use them. You keep saving up your time and your resources and your mental energy for some perfect occasion that never is going to happen. Because the truth is, man, that life doesn't start later, okay? It's starting right now. It's happening right now, in this exact moment. And every second that you spend waiting for it to begin is a second that you're never going to get back. Later is not real. It's just a construct. It's just you trying to comfort yourself that, oh, I'll worry about it later. Right now is the only time you'll ever have. Here's a thought experiment. Let's go back to this idea about whether or not you have 5 days left or 50 years left. What if I only had 1 year left to live? How would your priorities shift? What would I stop doing immediately? Who would I spend more time with? And what would I actually care about enough to keep, right? These are questions that you probably should ask yourself, because it's sobering when you realize that the answers are pretty obvious and clear. I would probably cut out the busy work. I probably would think, well, I've got enough money to survive. Why am I still grinding, trying to do whatever, right? Why am I still working this job? Why am I still going to these places that I don't care about? I would stop obsessing over trying to look physically beautiful and trying to, impress myself with getting a six-pack, It's like, this shit doesn't matter. I would spend more time with the people I love, my girlfriend, my friends, my family. I would focus on creating things that I just genuinely like to make, not because I'm expecting them to do well or get admiration and validation from other people. And the strange part is realizing that even if I do have decades left, maybe I do have a full life to live, the things that matter with only 1 year left to live are the exact same things that would matter if you had 40 or 50 years left to live. The difference is just urgency. I'm sure when people are 85 years old and they know that they are on borrowed time, their priorities change and they realize that, man, all this shit that I was doing didn't matter. I should have focused more on my family and doing things that I loved. Why was I so concerned with maximizing shareholder value? Why was I so concerned about making sure that my car was polished and I had the latest Audi and my house was huge? Who cares? When you have borrowed time, the urgency changes. It makes you think much more clearly about what was always true but too easy to ignore. Like, most of the time that we spend is just on noise, and the urgency forces you to sift through that noise. And the challenge is learning to live with that clarity before you run out of time, to always have some level of urgency that this is always going to be important. It's always important to hang out with people that you love. It shouldn't matter if you are only 22 years old and you think you've got the whole life ahead of you. That stuff is always going to be important. Let me reiterate this idea that later, this word of later, is one of the most dangerous words that you could have in your vocabulary. Later is just how we justify skipping the calls that we meant to make or shirking our responsibilities to down the road. Later is what we use to avoid telling people what we mean to say and how much they mean to us and how important they are to us. Or it's how we push off those trips that we know we want to take. I know that I want to go to this place and see this one beautiful mountain range or whatever. It feels safe to say later because it tricks you into believing that there will be a later to get to and that you will have the time to do it. But you don't know if you'll be able to do that. And of course, later often turns into never. I'm never going to do it. And never is a much more brutal teacher than later. If time is equated to money, as a metaphor, then later is just debt. And debt is always going to come due eventually. You can pretend that it doesn't exist for a while, that, I'll get to it later, but the interest is always going to build. You're going to slowly but surely be losing seconds and minutes and hours and days and weeks and months and years of your life. That borrowed time is the interest building. And one day you're going to look back and realize that all of that interest and cost is way higher than you ever imagined. It's very sneaky. Later is going to steal those seconds one piece at a time until all you're left with is just regret that, man, I just wasted all that time. And that's why I try, even though I'm imperfect and clumsy about it, to be more intentional with how I spend my hours. And even just having a talk like this makes you aware of your own limited time. Not everyone is perfect. I know that I waste time. I scroll on YouTube Shorts too. Nobody can be perfect. But just be aware to know that later is a lie, and it's just robbing you of your time. Stop saying, I'm going to get to it later. I'll worry about it down the road. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Cross that bridge sooner rather than later. Not saying you have to do everything today, right now, but just be conscious about it and don't think that, oh, I'll get to it in 20 years. You can think about your grandparents from this perspective and how, old people, how different their relationship is to time. They're not obsessed with productivity and grinding and building a life in the same way that we are, obviously, because they've already lived their life. They don't need to do that. They don't need to measure their worth by how much they can cram into a single day because they've already done it all. Their lives weren't easier than ours necessarily. They might have had, an easier time buying a house and they had certain advantages, but they had their own struggles and their own responsibilities and they had families to raise. Like they raised your parents and your parents raised you. Their pace of life was different. But at the same time, old people, their pace of life was different. They could sit on a porch and not worry about feeling guilty about not grinding 20 hours a day because they didn't have social media. They didn't have all these external pressures telling them to get out there and get after it. Maybe they did in a certain way. Maybe there were certain pressures that society 50, 60 years ago had, but I think that it's different. They could actually spend a whole afternoon cooking and telling stories to each other and playing card games and not really worry about it. And you can still do that today. I'm not saying that you can't do that, obviously, but I think a lot of us feel as though that's just wasting time, and that's not really a life worth living. But of course it's worth living. I mean, it sounds ridiculous just to say that. You can live your life in any way that you want. But of course, today, we live in a world where every second feels like it has to be monetized. And if you're not producing, you're falling behind. If you're not hustling, you're wasting time. But what if that isn't true? I just talked about this in my last video. What if those slow moments of just chilling out and having a drink on your porch is actually the life worth living? What if those pauses and silences and the time where nothing seems to be happening, you're just enjoying the moment, what if that actually is the most important part of your life story? Maybe the old people in our lives, our grandparents, knew something that we've forgotten about, but time doesn't always need to be min-maxed. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, man. The idea of chasing efficiency and producing and making sure that you're worrying about the future, that makes you feel less free. The more that you chase it, the less freedom you're going to have. I used to believe that the more that I optimized my schedule, the faster I was going to get, and the more free time that I would have, the less things I'd have to worry about. But now I've just created a new system to worry about. I've got new tasks and responsibilities, and I'm not any more free because of it. You could say that I'm more efficient and I can produce things faster, but it's not as though I've just got 8 hours a day to do whatever I want now. I've just created a new way to look at the world. Being efficient and worrying about the future doesn't necessarily save you time. It just gives you new ways to burn that time. And that's the trap of hustle culture. It tells us that the goal is to save time and to retire early and to make sure that you are making 100 grand a month. But really the goal should be to spend your life however you want and to spend it well. If you enjoy doing something that isn't productive and isn't doing something that society is going to benefit from immediately, who cares? Saving time doesn't mean anything if you just use those saved minutes to pile on more meaningless tasks. You can't just stockpile your time like it's money. You can't put it in a vault and spend it later. All you can do is just choose to spend your time wisely now. I think we love to tell ourselves that life really is going to begin once we hit the next milestone. Once I graduate, once I get this job, that's when I will be free. And I know that's about myself. I know that I can already tell myself this today, that it doesn't matter if I'm making 5 grand a month or 500 grand a month. I'm not going to feel any happier. It's not really about the money. It's not about the job title. It's not about the diploma. It's about feeling satisfied. And the cruel part is that most of us don't know how to be satisfied. We don't know how to feel secure and living in the moment. And I don't think there really is a way to know how to live in the moment. That's just something that you have to figure out and deal with. It's been a struggle for me the past year to just be able to be satisfied with my life and my lifestyle and the people that I'm with, regardless of how well I'm doing with my career. It's very hard to separate those two. But I know deep down that life is not about the finish line. It is never going to be about how well your video performs or how well you're doing, if you get the accolade at your job, or even if people finally recognize and admire your work and you feel like you're doing something important. That doesn't really matter because that's a fleeting feeling. You might feel good for 15 minutes, but then that's going to go away. So here's the question then. How do I stop wasting time? Because the answer is not always going to be dramatic and obvious and oh, just do this one thing, then you can stop finally wasting your time. You don't need to do anything big like quit your job tomorrow or sell everything and live like a nomad. It's about small choices, the kind of things that don't look revolutionary, but they add up over time. I was hanging out with my girlfriend recently, and we both got books. I don't really read much anymore, but I finally got a book, and I have not really read much of it, but I got Atomic Habits, and it's probably the most famous productivity book. Everyone has talked about it before, and I've only read like 10 pages of it, but it does open by talking about how the small habits that you have are so much more impactful and so much more important than trying to do big sweeping changes. If you just have small little changes every day that you are very intentional about keeping in your day-to-day life, then you can actually build something that will produce the life that you want. You can't just stop wasting time by waking up one day and saying, today I will finally stop playing video games for 3 hours a day. That's not going to happen. Maybe instead you could say, I will try to spend 5 minutes less of doing that today. I'll try to be a little bit better about that. I won't do this thing quite as much. Just a little bit. Just a little change. That's all you need. And you do that every day, and you will slowly get better. It's kind of how I feel with YouTube, where I know that I want to eventually make my videos really long, like a podcast, and I want them to be hours long. But I can't just up and expect to post a 3-hour video and people to watch it. People aren't used to that. You have to slowly, day by day, add a minute or even just 30 seconds, and the next video will be a little bit longer and a little bit longer, and over time, you can eventually get to that goal. And you need to start treating time like the scarce resource that it is. Spend it carefully and consciously and be intentional about it. Because whether you want to believe it or not, you do only have a little bit of time left. You just don't know how much that's going to be. But on the scale of history and the universe, a human life is fucking nothing, okay? You don't have that much time. Like I said, I'm kind of a nihilist. I know that nothing really does matter. If you know that there's certain things that you want to do just because you want to do them, then know that you only have so much time to do them. And once you've accepted that truth, that life is really that short, the question becomes much simpler. Am I actually spending my hours on what matters, or am I just wasting them on what doesn't? One of the hardest truths to swallow about time is that it doesn't stop for anyone, right? It doesn't care how tired you are, how burnt out you are, certainly not how much you have left to do, how much work you have. It's going to keep going no matter what. And that's both the most terrifying and freeing realization you can have about this kind of thing. Because once you accept that you can't control time, you start to understand what you can control, which is how you use it. You can't save it, you can't stockpile it, but you can choose where it goes. And that choice, the way that you spend your time, is the only thing that separates a well-lived life from a life wasted. Every day that you ignore that truth is a day that you'll never get back. I think sometimes a lot of people, they spend their whole lives waiting. They're waiting for retirement, to travel. They want the kids to grow up before they can chase their dream. Maybe you're waiting for the perfect career to land on your desk, waiting for the right person, the right partner. And so often, that moment never actually comes. You can just spend your entire life in this waiting period, in like the doctor's office waiting room, just hoping that it's going to come. And it often never does. It just shows how easy it is to waste the most valuable thing, which is time. We always imagine that life is going to unfold like this neat, linear story with clear chapters and steps. But the truth is that waiting around for this stuff to happen is just another form of wasting time. You can't wait for your Prince Charming to show up one day and everything is going to get better, because that's just not the way the world works. Every day that you're waiting around is you spending that day, spending that time, wasting it. And you're not going to get a refund for that, all right? And that's why the best time to do anything, the thing that you've been putting off, is almost always right now. And I get it, technology has really only made this harder. We're constantly surrounded by things that waste our time, things that hijack our attention, like YouTube and Instagram. And I know that that's ironic, me saying that in a YouTube video, but I think you gotta just realize that that is a fundamental truth of our world. I get it, I waste time too, and you might not even notice it. Like, what's a few minutes of scrolling? What's the big deal, right? But like I said earlier, small habits accrue and snowball into big effects long term. And if you waste so much time every day, like an hour here and there, that's going to form into your identity as someone that just wastes time like that. And the worst part about all that is that it's never even stuff that you remember. Like, do you really remember what you were watching, scrolling Instagram 10 minutes ago? Probably not. You never actually gain any value beyond just very shallow dopamine and entertainment. But all of your best memories and the most fun moments you have with your friends, they don't happen on your phone. They don't happen on a screen or through technological means. They can. I mean, I've had great times with my friends playing games on Discord and whatever, but most of the time, the value that you get and the most beneficial time is spent in the real world. And really, when it comes down to it, attention is simply the gatekeeper to your time. If something captures your attention, it captures your life and it captures your time. And right now, we're living in the digital age where everything is competing to get your attention. I'm competing to get your attention with this video. I get that. But it's why distraction feels so expensive, because it is. There's only so many days, so many hours in the day. And if you're letting your attention be constantly pushed and pulled around, you're never going to get anywhere. And it's not just about phones. It can be anything that steals your attention and presence. You know, just being busy all the time is a distraction. If you're constantly being pulled in different directions at work, that's another way of being distracted. Or being anxious about the future, that's a huge distraction. Overanalyzing and overthinking. And the irony about this is that many of these distractions disguise themselves as necessities, that you have to go to work and you have to have certain responsibilities and obligations that aren't distractions. They're just things that are just constants in your life. They feel important, and sometimes they are. It is important to go to work, but they also eat away at so many hours that you're never going to reclaim. And it's why I think it's so important that if you feel like you want more out of life, that you don't ignore that voice. Because I felt that voice very strongly with my career, and I knew that eventually I would have to do something that was not just this one linear 9 to 5 that was stealing all of my time. Or not even stealing, but just something that was not a good utilization of my time. I knew that it was not going to be the best use of my very limited time here on Earth. You got to do your best to get away from the things that siphon away so much of your time. And I get that work is, that's a huge privilege to not have to go to a certain job that you hate, that takes away your time. But if you feel it deep within your core that it's just not meant for you, then do something about it. Because the real question is whether or not what you're giving your time to is worth the cost. Because everything has an opportunity cost. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And saying yes to the wrong things can mean saying no to the things that actually did matter. And if those no's add up, if they accumulate, they snowball, suddenly the life that you wanted isn't the life that you're going to have. And that's why I've started to think about presence and time as a kind of wealth, where if you can actually be in the moment, not worrying about tomorrow, not replaying the past, you're rich in a way that most people never are. You are actually at peace with who you are as yourself. And I get it. It's a huge privilege to get to that place. And I'm certainly not there. And I don't think most people are that in that place. And presence doesn't necessarily add years to your life. I mean, maybe it makes you less stressed out and you live a little bit longer because of that. But it does make the years feel larger and more impactful. And there were more memories in them. And when you are not constantly worrying about wasting time and you can actually enjoy your time, you'll look back on your life thinking, man, that really was a life worth living. So I think I've talked long enough at this point about time. I think you get what I'm saying. And maybe the point is not just obsessing about how much time you have left, because that's not healthy. Maybe the point is just to live like it matters right now. Like I said earlier, don't take it for granted. Stop waiting for the perfect season, the perfect job, the perfect relationship to show up, because that's never going to exist. There's no such thing as perfection. The only real time you ever have is the time you have right now. And I get it. When I was a kid, I thought time was infinite. And now I know that it's very much not. And as painful as that realization is, it also is what makes life beautiful. Because you know that something is limited. It's finite. It's worth having. There's a really great moment in Troy, a movie with Brad Pitt. And he was talking about how the gods envy us because we are mortal. And it makes life more beautiful because we are doomed. Life is meaningful because it is not infinite. You need to stop throwing away time and treating it as if it is infinite, because it's not. Time is the most valuable resource that you will ever hold, and wasting it is the one thing that you cannot afford to do.